Hello, hello. Good morning, good morning. Long time no see. Let me just tilt that a little bit. Cool, cool, cool. Hello, hello, hello. Um, let's see. Let's go to hello. So is there a way that I can go live? Or like I can take my I'm talking to nobody, but I'm just speaking out loud to myself. Sometimes I do this. Just give me a moment. I'm actually going to read chapter 5 in Race First today in honor of Malcolm X because his parents actually were Garveyites. And not only that, because Garvey, his he's incredible. He was so ahead of his time. He was 100 years and maybe more ahead of his time. I mean, yeah, he might have been a couple 100 years ahead of his time. But I know you guys haven't heard from me for a while. The reason that is, and I don't really feel that I owe you an apology because nobody is funding me. I do this from the kindness of my heart. I would love to be paid for this, but I do this because this is who I am, and I'm just opening up to the world because my business coach told me to go ahead and do so. Not exactly in those words, but we came to an agreement that this was something that, this is who I am without the um all of the it's not even like I'm famous or anything like that. I know a few people or whatever, but like I said, I don't get paid to do this. But I'm hoping that I can spark some inspiration in those of you that are willing to listen, willing to share, and I appreciate you, you know. But I went on vacation as of April 6th, and I had planned that vacation, I don't know, about 2 months prior to that. So I needed a break. You can't just keep, you know, working, 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 working. Even like if you're working out, you need rest. Rest is actually one of the most important ingredients to creating the body you want. Also the mind as well. So during that time, I actually incurred another struggle. Nothing that I'm not used to, but it wasn't opportune. It just was so random. It just threw me for a loop. And to be honest, I needed a moment to get things together. You know what I mean? I needed a moment to address the situation. And I'm not saying the situation completely resolved, but at this point, I've come to terms with the situation and I'm moving on. Okay. So what did I want to say? Tomorrow is International Malcolm X Day. We don't need nobody's permission. A lot of people talk about who lived and died for us. We know, we have physical evidence that this man lived and died for our people. And of that alone, he also he still has an impact to this day on the entire world. So, you know, we honor him. And, it shouldn't just that we honor him just on that specific day, but of any day, we should honor him. You know what I mean? Just writing down some ideas. And the reason I'm taking my time is because I want to make sure that everything is still clear. I was having some technical difficulties with my computer the other day, and it's like 90%, but I'm like, whoa, I think I'm gonna buy me another computer real soon. Um, okay. So what else did I want to talk about? It was Malcolm X Day. Okay. That was tomorrow's Malcolm X Day. And if you're in Buffalo, New York, we will be celebrating at the Rafi Green Resource Center at the Maston District on Glenwood and Fillmore at 6 p.m. tomorrow. I don't know if things have changed. If there is, I will address it on Facebook. You can catch me there. What else? So we got that. We got that. I think I'm gonna just go ahead and get into it today because I just really wanted to test what was going on. Okay, so let's see. 5 minutes have gone by. Race first, chapter 5. You assume a right to write history within the last 500 years. Chapter 5 is entitled History. Let me start over. You assume a right to write history within the last 500 years. Let me get this light on, pardon me. This help me read. Okay. You assume a right to write history within the last 500 years, and simply because you have been able to dump so many tons of your history in the world and other people have not said anything by way of complaint, you think your history rests there. But a lot of things your Mr. Wells has said, we Negroes treat as bunk. Mr. H.G. Wells may divert civilization for the benefit of his Anglo-Saxon group, but that does not make it the fact that the people who lay claims to the civilization he attributed to others are going to give up easy. The black man knows his past. It is a past of which he can be totally proud. That is why before you this afternoon, black man, who will be nothing else in God's creation but a black man, Marcus Garvey. Out of cold Europe, these white men came, from caves, dens, and holes without any fame, eating their dead's flesh and sucking their blood, relics of the Mediterranean flood. Literature, science, and art they stole after Africa had measured each pole. Asia taught them what great learning was. Now they frown upon what the coolie does. Marcus Garvey. Garvey's study of history seems to have assumed significant proportions during his teenage years while serving his printer's apprenticeship. During this period, he interested himself largely in Black heroes of the Caribbean, of whom Toussaint Louverture, leader of the Haitian Revolution, was his favorite. His early articles in the Africa Times and Orient Review and in Champion magazine show this keen appreciation of West Indian history. Quite possibly before he first left Jamaica, he began to explore the history of Africa as well as that of Afro-America. His interest in African history was clearly stated in his early pamphlet, A Talk with Afro-West Indians. Here he commended his audience to a study of Edward Wilmot Blyden. You who do not know anything of your ancestry will do well to read the works of Blyden, one of our historians and chroniclers who has done so much to retrieve the lost prestige of the race and to undo the selfishness of alien historians in their history, which is said so little when painted as so unfairly. I'm going to pause here because if you're in Buffalo, New York, and even if you're not, there's a brother by the name of Lion Blyden. And when it comes to Marcus Garvey, I'm willing to put my money on him that he knows more than 90%, maybe 98% of people that talk about Garvey or might have known of him. Like literally, like, and he's the, to me, and we can put money up if you want. He's the foremost person that I know. He's the person that I know that has the most knowledge about Marcus Garvey and everything that he went through and what he represents and what he stands for. He's also the president of the Division number 433, which is in Buffalo, New York. And if you don't know who he is, I urgently suggest you come out tomorrow and find out. Even if not, call him, find him. He's easy to reach. He has books. You know, we got to support our own. He definitely has lots of knowledge that definitely is important. And it is needed, not just right now, yesterday now. You know what I mean? Let me get back into the video. Garvey's knowledge of and appreciation for the history of his race was reinforced by many of his early contacts. Deuce Muhammad Ali, I don't know, and if I say a word wrong, don't be mad at me. I'm not perfect. I just know how to read. There's probably hundreds of thousands of words I've never read before. So if I come across it, I'm showing humbleness in the fact that I'm not perfect, as all of us are, imperfect. So, you know, but you can pull me up on the side or tell me. I don't mind that. I'm humble enough to, you know, learn some things. I'm not arrogant. I'm not the smartest person in the world at all. You know what I mean? I don't even think I would want to be the smartest person in the world. You know what I mean? I would love to be smarter. I would love to be more knowledgeable. I would love to be, and I'm working on that on a daily basis. It takes longer time for me to ascertain and comprehend information than it probably does somebody that's really been doing it. I just been really starting to get heavy into it, but I've always had a small learning disability my entire life, and I'm not ashamed to say that. Where was I? Dost Muhammad Ali was the author of the well-known historical work on Egypt. Pardon me, my hair is making me itch. Land of the Pharaohs, William H. Ferris, one of the earliest editors of the Negro World, had previously published The African Abroad. John Edward Bruce had in 1911 been among the founders of the Negro Society for Historical Research in Yonkers, New York, and was its president. The society disseminated historical knowledge and collected rare books and manuscripts on the history of Black people. The society's Pan-African thrust was symbolized by the selection of King Luanika of Baraxalan as honorary president. Dost Muhammad Ali was among its corresponding members, as was Mary Du Chatelier of Bocas del Toro, Panama, later an important UNIA organizer. It antedated by 4 years the better known Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, founded by Carter G. Woodson. The secretary-treasurer of the Negro Society for Historical Research was the famous historian and bibliophile Arthur A. Schomburg. Commenting on the appearance of Woodson's Journal of Negro History in 1916, Schomburg suggested that this journal was stealing our thunder in which we are pioneered. Woodson himself several years later became Negro World columnist, and among Garvey's lifelong acquaintances from his boyhood in Jamaica to his last years in England was another of the leading Black historians of the time, J.A. Rogers. History, like everything else for Garvey, was a subject to be used for the furtherance of racial emancipation. He used history first to establish a grievance to show that the Black man had been wronged. Many of his writings were historical in this sense. In 1938, for example, he submitted a memorandum to the West India Royal Commission, a British government body which was investigating recent rioting and workers' revolts in the islands. Here he traced the history of the islands since emancipation, the denial of full equality of Afro-West Indians, their resultant migrations in search of work elsewhere, the usurpation of the island economies by alien races, in order to explain the recent upheaval. History, however, could also be used to instill self-confidence. He continually stressed the fact that the African had in former times enjoyed a creditable history, and that this had been acknowledged by historians such as Herodotus, who belonged to an era that felt less inclined to establish myths of African inferiority. The African, therefore, had nothing to be ashamed of in the face of allegations of inferiority emanating from the white world. Indeed, Black people should move from defensive to aggressively rehabilitate their past. The time has come, he declared, for the Black man to forget and cast behind him his hero worship and adoration of other races, and to start out immediately to create and emulate heroes of his own. We must canonize our own saints, create our own martyrs, and elevate to positions of fame and honor Black men and women who have made their distinct contributions to our racial history. Garvey's stress on the progressive nature of the Black past was a reaction to the distortions he observed emanating from the pens of white historians in his era. He therefore carried on a constant campaign against white historical writing on the Black past. In 1929, he declared that history is written with prejudices, likes and dislikes, and there has never been a white historian who ever wrote with any true love or feeling for the Negro. He continued, white historians and writers have tried to rob the Black man of his proud past and history, and when anything new is discovered to support the racist claim and attest the truthfulness of our greatness in other ages, then it is skillfully rearranged and credited to some other known race or people. for instance, the Cleopatra thing, for instance, the pyramids, for instance, math and science, etc., etc., etc. We had civilizations that predated the books that they tell you are the truth, as I was. Garvey's rehabilitation of the Black past, especially the ancient past, and his acknowledgement. Oh, by the way, in those books or books, because there's actually more than one. There's evidence that that work was plagiarized from thousands of years prior to that ever becoming. And did you notice that books? It wasn't like books have been here for thousands of years. Books haven't been here for thousands of years. There have been writings. You have scrolls, you have papyrus, you have hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphics, things. I mean, if you want to know, you can find out. You just have to do the research. Okay. Garvey's rehabilitation of the Black past, especially the ancient past, and his acknowledgement of the greatness of Black heroes past and present, in no way detracted from his ready mission that the Black man had fallen behind in preceding few hundred years in the march toward material progress. Also, women, by the way, because I be getting a lot of messages from y'all, and a lot of y'all be trying to tell me like it's like I'm always talking about men. Whenever I say the Black man, I'm talking about the Black family, period. Even if I'm reading from someone else's work, I am specifically talking about Black men and women. Black men could not be where they are without the help and the love and the support of Black women, and vice versa for Black women. And we love y'all, and we always will. Never forget that. I know there's a lot of times they're going to emphasize where we're showing that we don't, or where someone hasn't. But know that we do. Like we do, eternally, forevermore, infinitely. He incorporated this into a cyclical theory of history, which was designed to give the Black man hope. As in the case of all major revolutionary theories from Christianity to communism, Garveyism decreed that the attainment of its ultimate goals was inevitable. The goal in this case being the resurgence of the Black race. In the cycle of things, he lost his position, but the same cycle will take him back to where he was once. In the tradition of these major philosophies, however, the inevitable success which awaited the Black man would have to be activated by the Black man's own efforts. In other words, success was inevitable provided the Black man did not become complacent, did not cease to engage in constant struggle based on the lines of Garvey's program. As Garvey himself expressed it, we are bound to win. Black men and women are bound to go forward. Nothing can stop them but death in themselves. This same idea was succinctly expressed by Garvey during a debate with the delegate at the 6th International Convention of the Negro Peoples of the World held in Jamaica in 1929. The exchange went like this. By the way, do you know the things that I'm reading about today are over 100 years old? Garvey did this 100 years ago. Mr. Garvey, you don't believe there is a Mr. Garvey, you don't believe there is a literal interpretation to Ethiopia stretching forth her hands to God, Mr. Bailey? I do, Mr. Garvey. Then how can we do it except we attempt it? This idea was also the central theme of Garvey's long poetic saga, The Tragedy of White Injustice, which recounted African glories at a time when Europe was steeped in barbarism and cataloged a history of European genocide and rapine, R-A-P-I-N-E. I've seen that word before, but I'm not sure if it's rapine. Let me know. It postulated the Black man's inevitable resumption of glory and held out the hope of peace if the white man should mend his evil ways soon. Otherwise, Armageddon would ensue. Garvey's interest in Black history differed in one important respect from that of some cultural nationalists to whose school of thought he is sometimes linked. For he avoided the pitfalls of living in the past. He used history to establish a grievance, instill Black pride, and point a way for eventual race emancipation, and that was all. He refused to glory in the past to the extent of letting its exoticism become a hindrance to the struggle in his own time. By 1936, he was able to say, it is an established fact that the Negro had a glorious past. We need not worry about it now, because outside of inspiring us with confidence and hope, it will be of no material value to harp on it. For the present is what confronts us along with the future. 13 years earlier, he had expressed similar sentiments. We may go back 3,000 years ago and point to our civilization of that time, but we cannot live by the past. His interest in history was reinforced by a feeling of deep empathy with the historical suffering of the Black race. The following expression was typical. My firm purpose, my one purpose in life, is to work for the salvation of my race. Because of the cries from the grave, I hear the cry of 300 years, the cry of my great grandparents in the cotton and cane fields. I see the hired taskmaster drawing his lash across their backs. I hear them cry out in mortal agony. It pains, it pains, it pains. I see them fall under the lash. I see them fall to the ground. I see them buried, and I hear the wailing souls from heaven and from regions below. I hear the cry of my mother and father and millions of Negroes who have been brutalized. Go on, Garvey, go on, go on. And so, fellow men, because of that cry that comes from the grave, I have given up all material desires. I have given up all temporal pleasures and have dedicated myself to the sacred principles of the UNIA, the emancipation of the Negro race, and a free and redeemed Africa. This communion with the past was linked to a strong consciousness on Garvey's part of himself as an important historical figure. He often spoke in terms of future generations who would be inspired by his example, as well as of past generations whose sufferings would thereby be rendered not in vain. Not surprisingly, history played an important role in the day-to-day affairs of the UNIA. The race catechism, or catechism, CATECHISM, used by the organization was largely an encapsulation of historical knowledge concerning the race. The first of its 4 sections, religious knowledge, succinctly described Africa and antiquity with particular emphasis on biblical references to Africa and Africans. The second section, historical knowledge, provided a bird's eye view of Ethiopia, Meroe, Egypt, the slave trade, New World slavery, and Africans in the Americas before Columbus. It also included brief biographical sketches of such famous historical figures as Edward Wilmot Blyden, James Africanus Horton, and Samuel Lewis of Sierra Leone, the Reverend Samuel D. Ferguson of Liberia, Conrad Reeves of Barbados, Toussaint Louverture, Frederick Douglass, Prince Hall, Alexander Crummell, and others. J. A. Rogers and Arthur A. Schomburg sometimes lectured to UNIA locals on Black history, and Rogers from Superman to Man was offered as a bonus with subscriptions to the Negro World. Carter G. Woodson's Association for the Study of Negro Life and History was favorably reported by the paper's writers, and Woodson himself had actually taken the initiative in writing Garvey requesting permission to publish in his paper. Woodson had a similarly amicable relationship with Garvey's Harlem-based daily paper, the Daily Negro Times. John E. Bruce, who worked on this paper, was a friend of Woodson and sometimes plugged Woodson's historical efforts in this regular column appearing in the paper. As early as 1920, the Declaration of Rights demanded that the Black history be taught in schools. And when the organization obtained Liberty University in Virginia, it was envisaged, ENVISAGED, that this subject would be taught truthfully. For juvenile readers of the Negro World, the lives of famous Black figures such as entertainer Bert Williams and ex-heavyweight boxing champion Jack Johnson were serialized in comic strip form. Black Star Line ships were named after Black heroes, as were the Phyllis Whitley Hotel and the Booker T. Washington University, both in Harlem. This interest in race history was not confined to Afro-American Garveyites. Garvey himself was a collector of African art pieces, and on one occasion, we find him spending an afternoon with Professor William Leo Hansberry at the latter's Howard University office, reviewing pictures of ancient Ethiopian culture. An important feature of Garvey's makeup, which was illuminated by his use of history, was his deep feeling of humanity. He took the view that great civilizations in the past were destroyed by materialism and a submergence of human values, and looked forward to an ideal society which would learn from these past mistakes. In this regard, he saw a chance for the Black man to be humanity's savior. We will be. For the Black man had the double experience of his own ancient civilizations on the Nile, as well as the white man's in which he currently lives. The former had been destroyed by materialism and feelings of racial superiority. The latter was in the process of disintegration for the same reason. And you see it all day in the news today. You see what's going on out here. Day in and day out, there's dozens, if not hundreds and thousands of instances of racial tensions and disparities, or whatever the word is. It doesn't matter. It makes sense. You get it. The latter was in the process. Okay, I read that. The latter was in the process of disintegration for the same reason. In this situation, a black man can not only emancipate himself, but could perhaps save mankind in the process and salvage the bankrupt civilization of white Europe. He could do this because the heart of the Negro was deep and holy. Misdirected, it has been emotional and sentimental up to the present, but the recovery of the race in its sublimest thought will give it an urge directed toward an end that will bestow great blessings upon mankind. With that, I'm going to say peace. I hope your today is great, and I hope your tomorrow is greater. Thank you for watching. Love is love. Black people, I love you.